I'm Kim Johnson, and I'm the author and co-producer of Pan, or Music Odyssey. I came to make this film more through the fact that I've written quite a bit about the steel band. I was a journalist and I discovered there was this vast treasure of narratives, of stories that no one was tapping. So I thought, well, someone has to tap it, because these old guys, I mean, there are hundreds of them and they have great stories. It's like if no one ever wrote about jazz and someone discovered, hey, there's this guy called Louis Armstrong, and there are all of these stories and no one has written them. So I began to write about them, and I curated an exhibition about 5 years ago on the history of the steel band of Trinidad, and part of that exhibition was a short 13-minute film. And out of that I was asked, to make a feature length. So that's how I came into making this film. First of all, you can say it's the most important acoustic instrument invented in the 20th century. Until they invented the pan, it was not scientifically thought possible for someone to get distinct separate musical tones on a single sheet of metal. How that was discovered was really a tremendous feat of creative imagination and scientific rigor on the part of men and women who were not trained beyond secondary school. With the pan, when you're making it by pounding the metal and sort of pounding springiness into the crystal structure. It's a very, very complex thing, and they invented this without modern technology. In other words, by hearing it. The example I use is like, say, the traditional Japanese sword makers who could put down layers, crystallized layers of steel just 2 degrees apart in temperature when they crystallize without a thermometer. It's just incredible ability and imagination. The initial idea was a documentary with reenactments, and this documentary side, we were meant to follow some characters. And after trial and error, we followed several characters and we really chose the strongest. We chose some non-Trinidadian characters, a Japanese character, because we wanted to emphasize that pan, even though it was invented in Trinidad, has become a global instrument. And in a sense, Trinidad is the mecca of this global steel band movement. All of the events and incidents that I wrote about in the fictional story actually happened. I just created a character who would join them together. So that's how it evolved into this blend of contemporary documentary and historical fiction. I tried to remain true to the emotional experience. And given that several old men and women who lived through that experience saw the film, several of them wept, and they said that that's how it happened. So I felt there was a wider truth. In one scene, someone gets stabbed. And when we were filming that scene, there were crowds out that night seeing what's going on. There are these antique cars driving and actors and cameras and so on. And we hadn't filmed the fight scene yet. We just were filming the scene of the people arriving to this nightclub. And an old woman standing next to me said, "Oh my goodness, I'm getting goosebumps. The boy's going to stab someone." And I said, "Lady, how did you know that?" She said, "I was there when it happened." Because it was invented by teenagers, a family with 5 boys, and their neighborhood friends who are another 5 boys would say, "Let's form a band," and that's it. In many cases, that became fighting because there was such a passionate loyalty to their band that if another band dissed them in any way, it would come to blows. It was as if forming the band and learning the music and making your band and your instruments better than the next one, it bottled up tremendous emotional energy that the kids didn't know how to control. So it was released very easily. So it became a fight between the 2 bands and a fight between the 2 neighborhoods. If you read, for example, on the early history of jazz, if you read Jelly Roll Morton's autobiography, he describes how some of the jazz funerals in New Orleans would have guys with baseball bats. And very often, when they met, because they were in rival clubs and so on, it would become fights. We shot the whole fictional bit in 12 days. It was like a whirlwind of challenges, and it was the rainy season. It was just a nightmare that we were just blessed by God. I mean, one day it was raining cats and dogs about 2 miles away. When I got on set, it was dry as a bone. Several scenes were filmed in very, very rough, high crime areas of the city. And when we had the crowds come out, I mean, a lot of, very bad guys were there. And everyone, they behaved like gentlemen and ladies. And when the first AD said, okay, all quiet on the set, it was psst. So there were challenges. There were challenges to do so much in such a short time. We were blessed with good fortune and very, very hard work. Having Pan, or Musical Odyssey, on AfroPoP is what I see as a part of the growing globalization of the instrument and the movement, because it's more than an instrument. It's an ensemble, and it's a way of making music. But I also see it as a peculiar aspect of how the music of Africans has spread and has been adopted and accepted and embraced by people everywhere, including people who would love to deny it. Just as it catered for black people to survive the horror of slavery and of the Middle Passage, it has been adopted by people all over the world to help them deal with their own horrors. And that is the glory of black music. This thing is a piece of magic that was created here. It was created in a hellfire. But because of that, it has allowed people to deal with their own hellfires. I think being part of AfroPoP is being part of that broader movement, which I think is great. I think is where it should be.